Welcome to Goldfish on Games, where today we're going to be doing a deeper review into a game we've seen previously. So please join me as we step out of the Gloom. Which was developed by Blackmagic and published by Guildhall in 1995, with it coming out for both the Amiga 1200 and the CD32. But a year later it got a deluxe edition, and they didn't even make a new design, they just slapped on a few stickers. And no, I have no idea what is going on with the faces on the box. Inside we get the game on 2 discs, and I also happen to have the discs for the regular version as well, which also numbers 2. And for the manual we get this folded bit of paper. I know that some releases got a proper printed manual, so I'm not sure if this is a later cost-cutting measure, but it's not really needed for the game, which opens up with this simple but effective menu, which doesn't really need to be fancy as there's not many options. It's mostly about switching between a few predefined control options and what happens with the Gibbs. Oh, and there's multiplayer as well, but we'll be skipping over that as we normally do. So let's just jump right into the single player. And the first thing you'll be greeted to is the level introduction screen, with a few more interesting faces and with a little bit of a hint what is going to happen in the level. If you didn't know this already, this is a first-person shooter, and one that I would put between Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, as there's no variation of heights when it comes to the floors, but the walls are far more than simple straight lines. Not that you can really tell that in the earlier levels. For the most part, this is a relatively simple shoot everything that moves type of game, and that is reflected in the controls, as most of the options give you this basic forward, back and rotate with a button to shoot. In theory there's a second one as a strafe modifier, but I've never gotten it to work. But the CD32 controls on the other hand are quite interesting, as we still have the basics, but the shoulder buttons are strafe left and right, so score 1 for the world's best controller. But it does feel odd that they provided a setup program that allowed you to change all sorts of other settings, but there is nothing for the keyboard controls. They are completely locked down. And this is probably the biggest letdown of the game, but if you can overlook it, you will find this fun game waiting for you. Because as we can see, it's not shy about throwing lots of baddies on screen at once, with lots of firepower going everywhere, and oh so many Gibbs when a baddie dies. Which can make it a little hard to make sense of everything that's going on at times, particularly if you're running this on a lower end machine and you have to run it on some of the reduced resolution modes. But for most of this video, I'll be throwing as much resources at the game as possible, so you can see it at its best. But just keep in mind that you might need to turn some of the settings down depending on your system. As the joystick buttons are already taken up, there is no use button in the game, so it managed to beat Quake with its chest bump to use buttons and doors. And there are lots of buttons and doors that you'll have to rub up against in the game, not to mention all the wall humping that you'll have to do if you want to try and find all the secrets. But thankfully you won't have to face the button to trigger them, so you can be looking at the wall that's about to reveal a whole bunch of baddies while pressing the button behind you. As swarming you is one of the designer's favourite things in the whole world, including teleporting you right into the middle of a mob. Oh yeah, there is teleporters in this game as well, and they become far more integral into the level design as you go on. But most of the time, if you see what looks like a bunch of corridors coming at you, you just know that there's baddies about to come straight out and come at you. There are 3 main regions in the game, with this first one being called the Space Hulk levels, because it's got a very sci-fi based theme. And they managed to pull off some impressive features in this zone as well, like these translucent walls. Each of the episodes also has about 3 baddies that you'll face, with this initial one having a basic grunt with a gun, that thankfully is not a hit scanner. Amazingly, none of the baddies in this game are hit scanners, so you can always see and try and dodge their firepower. There is also, and I quote the manual and the intermission screen, the aggro skinheads. These are a melee creature that will try to get in close and punch you. And finally, there are the robots. Slow moving, but with some incredible firepower, these do take a bit of effort to take down. It's a nice introduction that really ramps up the difficulty before the end, as it starts teleporting you around the map and having quite a bit of geometry spinning around to really mess with you. The second episode takes place in the Gothic Tombs, so expect more of a horror look to the levels. But there's no real change in the lighting, as this engine doesn't really support it, even if they do try to trick you with some fancy texturing effects. The baddies this time around are these lizards, who like to get up close and personal, which I swear are wearing speedos, and these replace the skinheads, as they really want to try and get their claws on you. But there is something new in the ghouls. These things are transparent, which is a really cool effect. And they can also travel through walls, which really isn't. And they make the most awful racket when they're active as well, so you really want to take them down as quickly as possible. But to top it all off, they have projectile attacks. So those fireballs can come from anywhere. Which is similar to the Phantoms. They might look different, but they sort of act like the robots in the Hulk levels. Reasonable speed, a decent amount of armour, and a lot of firepower. This zone's levels tend to get a little more maze-like, with you having to go back and forth to hit switches to open up more of the levels. And with no keys, the complexity of the design is a bit limited. But the mix of having decent texture work, as well as having interesting room layouts, really does help the game. As it's not just boxes after boxes, you get curving corridors into rooms that open up large, with all sorts of interesting things going on inside them. Or possibly being in one room and seeing what's going on in another. And if you're particularly good, then you'll find your way to hell. And those between level screens really are keeping up with those faces, aren't they? The texture work is very, let's say, red. But it does have some of the more creative monsters in the game, as we get these floating head things, the metaphysics. And they don't want to come to you, no, they want you to come to them, and they'll try and suck you in and attack. And a group of them are very tricky to deal with, as they will try and hold you in place so others can attack you. They are quite cool, and a very interesting and inventive baddie. And you better make sure you've got some upgraded weapons or you're really not going to take them out. The other two monsters are pretty much what you'd expect. We have a melee one, this time it's a troll. And then we have the last one, which is this big fireball spewing demon. As this is very much an action game, there are a few pickups for you to find. There are these bouncing things that you'll have seen all through the video, which we'll get back to in a minute. But first off, I have to point out the baby bottles. These are your health boosts. I guess that's one way to get around the whole issue with the Red Cross. But it does feel a little bit weird considering how quickly some of those baddies can drain your health, as they're trying to make a bit of a joke out of you needing to get your health back. Thankfully the rest of the power-ups are a lot better, as there's invisibility, which gives you this great effect on your gun to show that it's active. And similar to Doom, it doesn't completely stop the monsters from being able to see and hit you, but it does give you a nice extra chance, particularly if they've not been activated yet. There's also this bouncing attack, which will make your shots bounce off the walls, which is great for clearing out some of those rooms, as well as some of those tight corridors with lots of corners. And if you're really lucky, you might also find the thermal goggles, which is done with a really neat effect. Which, as you can imagine, makes it really useful to be able to see a whole bunch of baddies in a room that's coming up, or ones that are hidden behind a door that's about to open. So we come on to the bouncing things, and these are the weapon mechanics. And as guns are a big part of the FPS genre, you might have wondered why I've left it so late in the video to talk about it. Well, the reason for that is it's a very weird system, as you only ever have a single weapon, with unlimited ammo. And there's a pretty simple progression system, with the more powerful weapons replacing the weaker ones. You start off with these simple red bullets, but they won't be around for too long, as with each new gun the colour and size of the projectiles will change, but the gun sprite itself, well, that will remain the same. And if that was the end of the weapon system, you might feel a little bit cheated. But you might have noticed there are usually quite a few of those bouncing balls, more than what you think would be needed. And that feeds into the upgrade system, as each gun has 5 upgrade points, which increases the rate of fire. And when you get it fully upgraded, then something extra will happen if you try and push it further. You get the Overdrive Mode, which doubles your firepower. This is timed with how long you have showing up on the HUD next to the upgrade count. And if you're very good, you might even be able to push the gun further, and be able to get the boost meter high enough that you can get the triple shot, which is amazing for those open rooms with lots of baddies, though slightly less useful for some of those cramped corridors. Due to the limited number of weapons, you can expect to stick to the same gun for a good part of each region, so at times it doesn't really feel like you're getting that much stronger as you're going on. And seeing it's just been mentioned, let's take a deeper look at the HUD. Those heads you can see, well, those are your lives. And yes, they've decided it would be a good idea to have a limited number of lives. I'm not a big fan of that in this type of game, and less so when there's no save or password system. The bar next to your lives is your health, so you better keep an eye on it. And the box in the middle, well, that's where the all-important messages will show up. Because we have lives and no scoring system, we need a way to get more of them. And what's better than having to complete a mini-game? And if you manage to find one of these TVs, you'll get the chance to play a Defender-style shooter. So you've got to zoom around the landscape, shooting the various aliens that spawn. If you're good enough and manage to clear all of the alien menace before you use up all of your chances, then you'll be awarded an extra life. Fail and, well, you get nothing. The TV will turn off and you don't even get a chance of another go. As far as I'm aware, and if you know different please let me know, there's one of these in each of the regions. And they're all hidden away past a set of secret walls, so don't expect to just stumble across them. So far I've been showing you the deluxe version of the game, and switching it to the regular edition we can see some of the changes that it brought, and one of the more obvious ones is the missing weapon sprite. Now it wasn't the most useful thing in the world, as it doesn't change, but I do miss it when it's gone. The HUD also got changed, with most of the items now showing up in the top left hand corner. But the biggest change had to be the various resolution modes, as Deluxe supported a higher 1:1 mode, with the best that the original could do was a double pixel mode instead. So you can make the game look much nicer in Deluxe if you happen to have the resources for it. It's a shame they didn't take the time to also improve the control system as well. But instead they rewrote much of the game engine, to the point that they removed the need for the AGA chipset. This means that any Amiga that's been upgraded to 2MB of RAM and has a 68020 CPU can run it. So good news for those big box owners, but I'm not sure many A500 or 600 users managed to get the chance to play it. And if you want to play it, well, there was some good news, as the source code for Gloom was released back in 2017, and for a while not much really happened with it. Not until Z-Gloom was made, by WizPig. And by using the gameplay code, but replacing much of the rendering, we can now experience Gloom on modern systems. And I have to say, this is a pretty good way to experience the game. It looks nice and it obviously plays well. But now you can change the controls, so you can now easily strafe on the keyboard or use a keyboard and mouse to play at the same time. They even did away with the lives and allow you to start on any level in the game, so the difficulty has been reduced quite a bit. Though starting some of those later levels without having the upgraded weapons can be quite hard. The project hasn't seen much activity in the last couple of years, which is a bit of a shame as that Defender minigame isn't supported. But instead of that we got a map that you can toggle. Though it is a little bit cheaty as it's completely filled out from the start, so you can easily spot all those secret rooms. I'll leave a link to the GitHub, as everything you need to get going can be found on the welcome page. And this supports something that we've not even talked about yet, mods. As a number of people made their own levels and total conversions for the game, including creating all their own new maps, but are also managing to remake some of the earlier Amiga FPS games like Death Mask, which can now be experienced with free movement. Though it still has the same weapons from the main game, so you are a bit limited in what you can do. There's a great webpage that goes into all the details of the various mods and how to get them going, so I'll include a link to them because I think they do a much better job than I will. If you come at the game as a maze shooter rather than a Doom-style corridor one, you'll actually find a lot of fun waiting for you. And yes, it doesn't quite have the range of weapons of some games, but they did manage to do some interesting things with it anyway. So until next time, I've been the Goldfish. That was not quite as dark as it was led to believe, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching this review. I do hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, then I made a video covering a number of FPS games for the Amiga that you might enjoy. Or if you really like this video, then consider using those buttons below. You know the ones I mean, as everyone talks about them. And until next time, thank you, and I hope to see you soon.